All right. So, are we ready to dive right in? We are going to start with an exercise that I encourage you to follow along in Excel. As I've mentioned already, Excel can be mastered only through practice. And I will be going through that exercise and demonstrating that on my screen. But the best way to gain familiarity with Excel and to become a really strong user of Excel is simply to just experiment with it and play around with all of the different functionalities so that you can feel really comfortable in understanding what Excel really has to offer to us. So I'm going to now walk you through creating some data, and we'll be manipulating that data and analyzing that data in Excel. So I'm going to jump back into Excel, and I urge you to open a blank Excel file if you haven't already and follow along with me. So first of all, we are going to, on sheet 1, so remember you can see what sheet we're on down here, we're going to insert some data around a very small income statement. So I like to challenge you to only use your keyboard, meaning just the keys, the left arrow keys, right arrow keys, up and down arrows, and your keyboard to do this exercise. So in cell B2, right over here, we're going to type in the text revenues and hit the enter key on the keyboard in order to exit the cell and move down to the next cell, cell B3. In this cell, B3, we're going to type in cost of goods sold, and again, hit the enter key to move down to cell B4. In B4, we're going to type in the heading gross profit and press enter. And now we can use our arrow keys to go up, so up arrow key, and over, right arrow key, to cell C1. And in cell C1, I'm going to type in 2020, our current year. Hit the tab key to move over to cell D1. And in D1, I'll type in 2021. Press the tab key to go over to E1 and type in 2022. Use the tab key again to go to cell F1 and type in 2023. Then I'll populate it with revenue for each year and cost of goods sold for each year. So revenue in 2020 was 100. I'm going to hit tab to go over to revenue in 2021, and that's 125. Press tab to go to the next year, 150. Tab to go to the next year, and 175. Now when I press enter, Excel actually knows that I'm building something that looks like a table. And so it's going to actually bring me, kind of like a typewriter would, right back to the beginning of the next line. So for cost of goods sold in 2020, we're going to assume 50. For the following year, 60. The following year, 70. And in 2023, 80. Now, notice that the text in column B was cut off when we input the data into column C. That's because the text in column B was too long. So we need to widen column B so that we can see the whole title. So you have two options of how you want to do that. But first, let's select the entire column B by hitting Control Spacebar. So again, that's Control Spacebar to select all of column B. And your two options here are to go to either the Home tab and choose Format and then Auto Fit Column Width. And it magically adjusts the column width to be able to show all of the contents in that column appropriately. I'm going to just undo that so that I can show you the alternative, is to simply double click the line between column B and column C. So double click that with your mouse. And again, that'll do the same thing. It'll auto fit the column width. If you wanted a row to have a certain height, you could select that row and press Shift spacebar. So Shift spacebar will select that row. And you can do the same thing as you did with the column, where you can auto fit the row height or even choose a specific row height if you wanted to. So let's talk about and build our first formula. So Excel formulas start with an equals sign. So I'm going to just zoom in just to make sure that everyone can see this, see it okay. So every Excel formula starts with an equal sign. So when I want to type in a formula here, I'm trying to figure out what gross profit is. And so I can find gross profit by doing revenue minus cost of goods sold. Certainly I could put in 50 and I can type that in and have that be a hard-coded 50. But I don't want to have to do that for every single year. I want Excel to do the work for me. So I'm going to use a formula anywhere that I possibly can. And I'll do that by typing in the equals sign and then using my arrow keys to navigate around the Excel workbook to find the cells that you need for that formula. So the signs and the formulas are relatively intuitive in Excel. And so we'll type equals, and then we want to select the revenue number. Then we want to subtract. So we're going to do the minus sign. Oops, just the minus sign. And again, use our arrow key to pull in the cost of goods sold number. Then hit enter when you're done writing the formula, and you'll see that we get the gross profit of 50 that we expected. Now let's copy that formula in cell C4 so we don't have to write that formula over and over again for every year. And we can do that by selecting cell C4 and hitting Command C, which is the shortcut for copy. Then holding down the Shift button, use the right arrow key to highlight cells D4 through F4. Then two options is press Command V, which is the shortcut for paste, or I'm going to undo that. Your other option is just to press enter. Notice that Excel automatically pasted the formulas, not the output, through the cells. So as we moved the formula into the columns to the right of column C, the relative references held. Cells that are being referenced in the formulas also moved right. So those relative references remained true. So one thing to note here is that the cells or the text in column B is aligned left. It all starts in the left of the cell, versus the numbers are aligned to the right. This is how Excel defaults the formatting. It recognizes that numbers are numbers, and it defaults to align that right, and opposite for text, which it defaults to align with the left. But if you ever want to override that default, you can either use all of the formatting tools that are at your disposal under the Home tab. So for example, if I wanted my revenues to be right aligned, I could press this button for it to be right aligned. Or I can use the Command 1 dialog box. So again, that's Command 1 will bring up this Format Cells dialog box. This is where any formatting that Excel is capable of can be applied on the active cell or the highlighted cell region. So on the Alignment tab, for example, this is where we can change the horizontal alignment or the vertical alignment. We can also change the font and the borders and the fill, etc. And all of those same functions are accessed also by the Home tab. So there's not really any better or preferred option there. It's really whatever you're comfortable with. I find that I like using the Home tab here as much as I can because it just feels like it's right there at my disposal. But again, just get used to one method and then try to be consistent so that you're always doing the same thing and just being as efficient as possible. All right, so now that we have an income statement for sheet 1, Let's create another income statement on sheet 2. So in order to add worksheets, which I've already added here, but a shortcut to add a worksheet is hitting Shift F11. So if you hit Shift F11, it'll add that new worksheet for us. And just note that if you haven't changed the setting to use the F1 and F2 keys as standard function keys, you'll have to hit Shift plus Fn plus F11 in order for that command to work. To move the sheet order, let's put sheet 1 first. We can simply drag it, and you see that arrow indicator, and let it go when you want that sheet to be there. Let's do the same thing with sheet 2, just so we can keep in the same order. I'm also going to update my zoom selection to 300%, just so we can see what's going on all of these tabs. Okay, so we're done with sheet 1. Let's move over to sheet 2 and practice doing that just using our keyboard. And you can hit Option and the right arrow key. So Option right arrow key will move you, if you can watch down here, Option right arrow will move us over. Option left arrow will move us to the previous sheets. So you can practice using that. It's Option and right arrow. On sheet 2, we're going to create another income statement. So I'm going to do that on my screen. Follow along with me. And the only difference here is that we'll have different numbers that we're populating this income statement with. Okay, so I'll give you just a minute to fill out these numbers. And just like we did on the previous sheet, let's auto column width column B so that we can see cost of goods sold, that whole label. And of course, for gross profit, let's practice doing that formula again. We type the equals sign and do revenue minus cost of goods sold and press enter. And then from there, we can Command C, and then Shift right arrow, right arrow, right arrow, and Command V to copy and paste that formula.